start the timer. Oh, I'll be doing that.
July 15th, 2010, the National Assembly of France banned wearing Muslim veils in public. The ban supposedly advocates for equality and is done in the name of laïcité, separation of church and state. However, the ban does the opposite of this and is an indication of the French administration's prejudice against Islam, which leads to violence against Muslim women. Banning Muslim veils in France promotes Islamophobia. Thus, banning Muslim veils in France promotes Islamophobia. Advocates claim the ban separates church and state. However, it does the opposite. Laissez-faire policy demands the neutrality of the state. Banning religious garments is political interference with citizens' freedom to practice religion. Therefore, religious freedom is directly threatened by the state. Furthermore, the New York Times reported that laissez-faire is reshaped as a weapon to defend the traditions of French life against what many see as the frightening influence of a growing Muslim population. This perceived threat to traditional France is political motive behind the government's unfair treatment. Also, in the name of laissez-faire, French politicians pushed for more limitations on veiled women to protect traditional France. Politicians such as Nicolas Sarkozy call for veiled women to be barred from universities or brought up to felony charges. Even Pascal Boursiard, junior minister of women's rights, said she was not sure that the veil had a place at the university level. These regulations do not maintain but violate laissez-faire, as it restricts Muslim women's religious right to practice religion and limits their quality of life. This ban, therefore, legalizes religious discrimination. Also, banning religious garments doesn't lead to equality in France, as also claimed. Supporters of the ban believe discarding these items integrates female Muslims into France and promotes gender equality. However, the ban doesn't accomplish this. First off, as stated previously, this ban doesn't protect or promote the rights of religious women. John Hanford, former ambassador for international religious freedom, criticized the ban as a threat of religious freedom because of government interference. It is a Muslim woman's religious right to wear the veil without government interference. Rather than protecting Muslim women's freedom to practice religion, this ban purposely constricts it. Secondly, banning religious garments doesn't advocate for gender equality, since only women members of Islam wear these items. Denying a Muslim woman's choice restricts their freedom of religion that doesn't also restrict men's. Therefore, unequally affecting members of Islam based on gender. Though many supporters argue that banning religious symbols will take pressure off Muslim girls who are forced to be veiled, many Muslims maintain that veiling is a choice. Quanta Ahmed, a devout Muslim, authored, "As a Muslim, I strongly support the right to ban the veil." In it, she discusses the assumption that veiling is forced. Even supporters like Ahmed criticize the assumption that most women are forced to be veiled, so promoting this perception leads to increased public discrimination. Authors such as Layla Abu Longhood, Fredette, Eve Durian Smith, and Ahmed discuss saving Muslim women because it's perceived that Muslim women are brainwashed victims of oppression. This perception is fueled by Western democracy's political parade of saving brown women overseas to justify modern invasions, such as the Afghan War. Fredette writes, "In this case, Muslim women have to be saved from their culture regardless whether or not they choose to wear the hijab or burqa, and regardless of what it means to them. This perception reinforces the assumption that because Muslim women have to be saved from their culture to the superior culture, Western culture is the superior culture. These presumptions reinforce prejudice as it establishes superiority over Muslim women, religion, and culture, therefore promoting Islamophobia." In fact, this ban is a reflection of the French government's Islamophobia. In 2004, the Jewish kappa, Muslim veils, oversized Christian crosses, and Sikh turbans were also banned. However, the regulations unequally affected Muslims. As you can see from this graphic here, the law had a loophole for most theists, but Muslims were excluded, leaving them unable to practice their religion, as a result, diminishing their religious freedom. Also, French politicians tend to indicate prejudice against Islam. Caitlin Killian, a professor and scholar at June University, notes in her journal that French politicians frequently attribute Muslim men to community violence. However, Dr. Friget, a PhD at the University of Washington, mentions in her journal, when looking at criminal reports, the data indicates that gang rape in France is A, not new, B, not limited to Muslims, and C, not targeted at Muslim or even Arab girls, but primarily white girls. The disconnection between Muslim men and safety is clear in criminal reports, but French politicians continue to make this association based on personal assumption rather than evidence. This is another indication of Islamophobia within France's administration that leads to harsher regulations to those practicing Islam. Lastly, the ban directs abuse towards France's veiled women. According to the National Observatory Against Islamophobia, 3 years after implementing the ban, 80% of anti-Muslim acts involving violence and assault were directed at women, most of them veiled. Subsequently, this ban fuels and continues to fuel hate towards the Muslim veil, furthering France's oppression of the Muslim population through public violence and humiliation. The intention of this ban stigmatizes Muslim women, therefore promoting violence amongst the public. Niels Michnieks, the Council of Europe's Commission for Human Rights, agrees in its 2014 report that France's preoccupation with Islamic dress only highlights and stigmatizes Muslim women. Such things take place in broad daylight and with the total indifference of the people around. Abdahi Sekiri, leader of the French Council of the Muslim Faith, said in disgust to the New York Times, "Normalization of violent discrimination can be inferred from the indifference of witnesses as Sekiri describes. This indifference displays increased prejudice influenced by the ban's implementation. This threat pushes Muslim women into isolation." Jennifer Fridet writes in her academic journal, "Banning these garments will actually reduce the likelihood that women will be able to live as full French citizens. Instilling fear into France's Muslim women is another approach this ban affects their quality of life based off religion." In conclusion, banning Muslim veils in France promotes prejudice against Islam, as its claim for equality and separation of church and state is derived from a place of Islamophobia within the administration, therefore triggering more violence and discrimination against Muslim women. Thank you.
Okay, Alex, here's your first question.
Cool.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you went about evaluating your sources when you conducted your research?
While evaluating my sources, I used the Cornell notes to accurately depict what the author's line of reasoning and to decide whether the source was credible or not. But often what I found was that I had an abundance amount of sources that I could use for this paper, but they commonly overlapped, and so that was my issue. And I feel that I could have bettered my research if I'd focused more on research specifically on France. I think I used one source a lot, and I wish that I'd found a resource that just focused in on France more.
And if you could continue researching this topic, what other kinds of questions came up for you as you were conducting this research?
Questions that commonly came up for me was the discrimination, whether it was mostly within women who wore the hijab or burqa, or if there was variations of this, or if the type of area, whether it was more of the wealthy area, or if it was more the poorer areas that had more discrimination, or if it was the opposite, or all around. I think there was definitely variations, but I wish I could research more about that, because I think that would make my paper more in depth and bring more value to it.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay.